I'm Alan Stokel. Did you know that Joshua Slocum, the first man to sail solo around the world in 1895, had competition in the person of a woman, Jeanne Baret, who began a circumnavigation of the world in 1766? Jean Baret was born on July 27, 1740, and passed away on August 5, 1807. Disguised as a man, she circumnavigated the globe in 1766, becoming the first woman to do so. Baret was a most unlikely seawoman. At some point between 1760 and 1764, Baret became employed as a housekeeper to naturalist Philibert Commerson, who had settled in Toulon-sur-Arroux. After his marriage in 1760, Commerson's wife died 2 years later in childbirth and in April 1762, and it seems most likely that Baret took over management of Commerson's household at that point. It's strongly believed that Baret and Commerson shared more than the average personal relationship, as Baret became pregnant in 1764. Now, at that time, French law required women who became pregnant out of wedlock, or while they were not married, to obtain a certificate of pregnancy in which they could name the father of their unborn child. Baret's certificate from August of 1764 shows that she refused to name the father. Later, the two moved to Paris together. And this is where the story gets really strange. Louis Antoine de Bougainville was putting together a colonial expedition on the ships La Baudusse and Étoile in 1766 to 1769. Commerson was invited to join Bougainville's expedition as a botanist and doctor. He hesitated in accepting because he was often in poor health, requiring Baret's assistance as a nurse. His appointment allowed him a servant, paid as a royal expense. But women were completely prohibited on French Navy ships at this time. Believe it or not, they were thought to be bad luck. At some point, the idea of Baret's disguising herself as a man in order to accompany Commerson was conceived. To avoid scrutiny, she was to join the expedition immediately before the ship sailed, pretending to be a stranger to Commerson. She devoted herself to assisting Commerson as the ship's doctor and botanist. Her behavior was exemplary, and Monsieur de Bougainville asked the Crown to grant her a pension of 200 livres a year. Each livre was thought to be worth about £1 of silver. Joshua Slocum was born on February 20th, 1844 in Mount Hanley, Annapolis County, Nova Scotia. He was the fifth of 11 children to John and Sarah Jane Slocum, née Southern. Joshua descended on its father's side from Quakers who left the United States shortly after 1780 because of their opposition to the American War of Independence. The Slocums were granted 500 acres, or about 2 square kilometers, of farmland in Nova Scotia's Annapolis County. During his time as a merchant seaman, Slocum freely traveled the world on ships containing goods. Nowhere near as big, but much like the container ships of today. Around 1767, he had moved to San Francisco and became the master of 8 different ships at various times. By then, women were allowed on board, and his wife and later children traveled with him. They survived shipwrecks, mutinies, a murder charge, and bankruptcies. In Fairhaven, Massachusetts, he rebuilt the 36-foot or 11-meter gaff rig sloop named Spray. He wrote in his log, "I have resolved on a voyage around the world, And as the wind of the morning of April 24th, 1895 was fair at noon, I weighed anchor, set sail, and filed away from Boston, where the Spray had been moored snugly all winter. Slocum managed to take advantage of the media giant of the late 19th century, the press, or newspapers. It was the social media of the day, and although much slower than the internet, it transmitted to a large audience a mixture of news, politics, and sports. As he made his journey around the world, he was greeted as royalty, enjoying the hospitality of kings and naval institutions almost everywhere he went in the civilized world, and often was greeted as a hero by the inhabitants of entire islands. He began giving speeches of his adventures as he traveled, and on his return, he wrote that book, Sailing Alone Around the World. It's a great read, by the way, a story of pirates, hostile tribes, and even a navigator ghost who sails Spray during an illness. Joshua Slocum disappeared during his annual trip to the Caribbean in November of 1909 while aboard his beloved boat, the Spray. Baret, on the other hand, stayed with Commerson in Mauritius as he was ill. Commerson died in Mauritius in February of 1773, and Baret stayed on, bought a pub, and on May 17, 1774, she married Jean Baret, a non-commissioned officer in the French army. They later returned to France, completing the world's first circumnavigation of the earth by a woman. She died on August 5th, 1807. As one could imagine, there has been quite some controversy about her life. But recently, a new biography by Daniel Claude, called In Search of the Woman Who Sailed the World, was published in 2020. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Or do just one. I'm Alan Stokel. Thank you so much for watching. Fair winds, everyone, and stay safe.